what we realized was he was giving us his presence, and we were on mission with him. And there was a joy there that was countering some of the deep sorrow we were walking through. Didn't take it away.
Sure.
We didn't instantly heal anyone.
Right.
But his presence was bigger and his peace was bigger.
Have you ever met someone who just radiates joy and lives her life so that it's just all about joy and how God can use her and bring joy to others? Well, I'm sure you know people like that. And my guest today is filled with joy, and she is going to inspire you to lead an even more joyful life than you're living today. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much that you're here. You're going to love meeting my guest, Teri Bledsoe. Welcome to the Generous Girl podcast. Today I'm joined with Teri Bledsoe, and she is currently a facilitator of Women Doing Well and the incoming chairman of the board. And she's been involved in women's ministry for over 30 years as a teaching leader, Bible teacher, and she's married to Chris Bledsoe. They live in Atlanta, have 4 children, 3 grandchildren. And as we talk about with Women Doing Well, when you participate in that program, you come away with your 2-word purpose statement, and hers is inspiring joy, which I think you will sense throughout this conversation, as she is amazing and so full of joy, and she loves to sprinkle generosity wherever she goes, being a vessel for the kingdom of joy and grace. So welcome, Teri.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Kim.
So great to be here with you as well. And I love that you've been a Bible teacher in the South for so many years. I moved to Dallas out of college, and there were several women Bible teachers in that Dallas area that really just had such a huge impact on me. And it's such a gift to have the gift of teaching that way. So are you doing that today?
Right now I am. I do mostly speaking engagements right now and through facilitating at Women Doing Well. So that's been my passion recently.
Yes, and I can see why it is your passion, and especially with your 2-word purpose statement being inspiring joy and just wanting to spark generosity. So in our pre-conversation, you were talking about just how generosity has really been the key to sensing God's presence and just seeing how people show up, as they're led by the Lord to spend their time with you. And we also were talking about, which I love, it's, you often think of time, talents, treasures with generosity, but let's also add, as you said, the ties, which are the relationships, and then the testimony. And so say a little bit more about that.
Okay. Well, I think for me, I became a believer as a child and walked with the Lord and got married. And then we had a daughter. And then I had to have a hysterectomy when I was about 23. And after that, we began praying, Lord, how can we grow our family? And he laid adoption on our heart. We actually had a couple come to the hospital and visit us and share their adoption story. And so we felt very affirmed that, okay, this is how the Lord was going to do it. And sure enough, 2 years later, we adopted our son, Christopher. And then after that, we adopted 2 more children. They were foster children. We have a daughter, Hannah, she's 28, and a son, Daniel, and he's 25. So we really felt that our ministry at that point was sharing with other families about adoption and about foster parenting. And also I would share with women in Bible study about infertility and just God's goodness, even in that hard season.
And so those were all local adoptions in the States.
Yes, they were all domestic. Yes.
Domestic. I have one of my sisters has 3 biological and 2 children from China. And it was just such a miracle to be able to, receive those precious kids into her home. And yes, I just love all these adoption stories you just see God's fingerprint over all of them. And so how did you balance then being a mom of, all these littles and being a Bible teacher?
Well, I think early on we lived in the North Georgia mountains. And so life was a little bit slower. We now live in Atlanta. So we're right in the breakneck speed of the city. And I love it. I love the life in the city and the diversity in the city. I just feel like I see God in each person and it's fun.
So
but back
true.
Then, back then, that was my outlet, was Bible study. And I would travel and teach and speak. And so it gave me connection with other women. And it was also, they refueled me as I was pouring out.
Definitely. And similar for me, when my kids were little, I was a part of this teaching team at Saddleback, and just, I didn't teach that often because of the little kids. And that was nice for all of us because we all were able to just do a little bit, and it went a long way. But it was life-giving for sure to be journeying with women at the same time, when you are raising your kids. And then how did you tell us more about Women Doing Well and how you got involved in that?
Yes. So we left the mountains and we moved back to Atlanta, and my husband started a business, and for 11 years we lived in a suburb of Atlanta. The kids went to Christian school. We were involved in our local church, and then he sold the business. And about the time he sold the business, we began going through personal issues with our younger 3 adopted children, addiction, mental illness. And so we had this 2 very parallel lines in our life going on. We had the sale of this company, which basically overnight we became different people. And then we also had this heartbreak of these children that were literally unraveling day by day, and trying to make sense of all that. I think it was Watchman Nee that said the parallel tracks of joy and sorrow, they run parallel. And so that was exactly what we were experiencing. And we had a fabulous community, but we had at one time 3 children in different treatment centers, and one was on suicide watch.
Oh my goodness.
We needed an infusion of hope and endurance and resilience, and just really for God to just cover us. And he did. And we discovered a community of generosity, a kingdom community called The Gathering. And through The Gathering, God would begin a journey with us, even to this day, of showing us how the practice of us being generous, he would love us and give back to us, and really give us the joy to stand what was going on this side of heaven, things we couldn't change. And the children eventually came out of treatment and have been all 3 in and out of treatment. They have, varying mental illness issues. But the thing that we learned at that time was that God doesn't just give you what you need. He gives you what he wants you to have. He gives. And that became sort of our testimony and our understanding that this sale of this company, this resource, wasn't for our consumption. It was for us really to use, but also to experience him.
So much to what you just said. And seriously, I just recently, I had Kay Warren on the podcast last fall, and being at Saddleback, she would teach on what you'd said, the joy and suffering and the parallel tracks. But just last week, I heard Rick Warren on an Instagram post that talked about, so parallel to what you just said, where he goes, when the Purpose Driven Life book came out and things were going crazy and the book sales were just nuts and so much more than anybody ever anticipated. He goes, that was the same time that Kay had breast cancer, and he's holding her, in the bathroom, and 3 young kids. And he said, I wondered if I was going to be a widow. And he said, I really used to think that life came in these high mountaintop experiences and the low valleys. But he said through that, he realized it's not all bad. It's not all good. It's just like always going on at the same time. And so much is, like you said, like we can realize what's in our control and out of our control. And most is very much out of our control. And what do we focus on, though? Do we have joy when things just seem like they've so gone south and we can't make sense of things?
Yeah. And I feel like for us, we were walking through the very thing that God would use later as our testimony. And that is, you can have joy in the midst of scarcity and deep sorrow. We know that from Habakkuk. Right? He said, though, the leaves wither and there's no, yet I will rejoice. And I think for us, God wanted to show us that he is bigger and his love is bigger and his joy is bigger than anything this side of heaven, that,
Right.
everything this side of heaven is broken. But he is coming to make it all new.
Yes.
And that's for us so being generous was not just a spiritual discipline, but it really was the vehicle to get us into his intimacy with him and to partner with him and to worship him again. And so we began giving to organizations. We began volunteering our time. We were always active with foster parenting, obviously giving our time and our family, but we began to look at other relationships to those ties. And what we realized was he was giving us his presence and we were on mission with him. And there was a joy there that was countering some of the deep sorrow we were walking through. Didn't take it away.
Sure.
We didn't instantly heal anyone.
Right.
But his presence was bigger and his peace was bigger. And we realized that it was his deep love that he was giving us as we were pouring out even to others. And that for me, I will never forget, because he would show us very tangible ways of love. People would come and pray with us, bring a meal. We did a podcast we wrote a blog for a while for parents, Christian parents of kids with mental illness. And, so there was lots of ways that God was using us to be generous to others and receive his joy that way. And it was so powerful that now that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about women doing well, because I think women, we know there's a great transfer of wealth that's going on in the world. And eventually women will hold the majority of the wealth in the world. And what we do with it, we have the opportunity to experience him and his joy and do good for other people and partner with him. So that's kind of where we came from. And now it's our life mission, Chris and I, to be generous, but not just to give, but to give with purpose, right? To give with a purpose of the kingdom being experienced by the recipient and also by us.
So well said. So when you sold the company and now you're looking at these resources that you didn't really have access to until the company was sold, and you're looking at your giving, how did you and Chris determine like your focus of your giving? Was it one area? Like I had one gal on the podcast where she grew up in a divorced home and so did her husband, and they really wanted to have an intact marriage for their whole time together, which they did and still do. But as a result, they wanted all their giving to go to marriage and family related ministries. So did you do that, or do you have like a blend of Africa as well as domestic?
Yeah. So it was so funny, Kim. We have this wealth event. We sell the company.
Yeah.
And we've got these kids in treatment all over the United States. And we're like, okay, what do we do? And so one day the internet, you got to think this was 12 years ago. I just Googled strategic kingdom giving and the gathering, this kingdom minded group came up. So I called them. And so they were getting ready to have a conference. And so we went. And that is where we always feel every year that's kind of like our continuing ed, our kingdom continuing ed.
Right.
So we try to pick 3. We had a very wise pastor tell us, you can't be all things to all people.
Correct.
So we picked 3. And it was just like you said, something kind of local, something national, and then something worldwide.
Okay.
And so Chris and I have a giving plan. We give together the largest amount. And then I have an amount and he has an amount. And I will tell you that plan through the years has created more intimacy between the two of us. I love to see how God is stirring and breaking his heart through the things he wants to give. And I also love sharing with him what God's doing. So that's kind of our recipe, is sort of together we do the big global.
Yes.
And we've walked with Bob Goff, with Love Does for years. We do a lot of church planning, city to city. Chris is an entrepreneur, so he's passionate about church planning.
And that's connected to Tim Keller's group.
Yeah, Tim Keller's group, and city to city. And then nationally, we work with, we've been on the board at Pine Cove Children's Camp.
I went to Pine Cove. Oh,
Did you go to Pine Cove?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes,
Well,
Tyler, Texas.
Yes. Well, my whole family is from Tyler, so and Quitman, yeah. So we are very passionate and very involved. And again, it goes back to what we talked about. We feel like when we are in a relationship with a ministry or a nonprofit, that we're giving our time, we're going to volunteer, we're going to be boots on the ground, we're going to sit on the board and share our talents, we're going to give our money. We're going to give, but I will tell you time and time again, what we found is our relational collateral, the ties, the people that we introduce to these ministries or their giftedness. It's so fun to be a connector and then just watch what God does.
Yes.
And then our testimonies, because what we've realized is, even though it's not something that, we would much rather talk about the happy and the successful times.
Sure.
But usually it is those broken places in us that God is shining, and he has something for that hearer that we have no way to know. And we always have a choice. Are we going to be vulnerable and transparent and share this broken side? Or are we going to show up as the donors? Right?
Right.
And I will tell you, I think he is way more glorified when we show up as the broken parents, literally waiting on him. And he just uses our generosity as the vehicle to get us, to that place. So, yeah.
It's so good and so true what you're saying. And, one gal I had on the podcast a long time ago, she just talked about her husband does all the finances, but every year she wants to go with him to the financial planner meeting with their investment advisor to find out how much they can give. That's all she cares about. Just tell me how much I can give. And I think if someone's listening right now, if you're listening and you're not understanding like the generosity component of looking at what God's entrusted you with and then giving, as we said, it's not just money. It's your whole self of your time, your talent, your treasure. But I just want to encourage the listener, like whatever that is, wherever you live, in this country, there's something that God has placed you there in that area where you are that he wants you to be a part of. I guarantee, whether it's your local church or, a local organization, or maybe like you said, it's national or global. But I would just really encourage everybody listening to take that step. Even if you feel like God's laying a number on your heart when you're praying about how much to give and it feels just there's no way possible, that's actually the best way, because then it can only be God to make it possible. But you will never be the same, because we are just these empty vessels. And when we truly are emptied of ourselves, he can flow and he can be, I have placed you here because I want to flow through you with the resources to get to here. And it's such a privilege that he chooses these broken vessels to do that. And then, like you said, we're just the ones who are blessed by, especially the relationships. I heard this guy speak just in Orlando last week, and he was talking about, I'm not uber wealthy, but I tell you, he goes, if you looked at a map all around the world, pretty much almost every continent I could go to and stay with someone I know who's a dear friend.
Wow.
And he goes, I am so rich in relational capital. And he said, if I was in Mumbai, India, I could call someone and I could stay there. And really, that's wealthy, is the people and just all the stories. And I feel like with each person that I know in my life, like everybody shows like a diamond, like a different facet of God in a different, beautiful way. Because everybody's so unique, right? And I always look when I'm on the streets of whatever city, I'm like, how could the Lord make everybody's face look different? If I was given that task, I could probably do like 10 faces, and he's done over 7 billion people. It's really incredible. But I mean, how blessed are we to get to partner with him? And he's such a generous God. You can never outgive God. And and he just wants us to be these, willing people that his huge power and glory can flow through. But, I love your 2-word purpose statement with inspiring joy, because when we have the rough times, though, the track of the suffering and the hard things, it's very easy to get paralyzed or just feel like you have no energy to go forward. And I think we get isolated where we feel like we're the only one who's going through something so hard. And if we get in that spot, then, it's sort of like then our eyes all turn inward. Right. We're not able to look outward. And it's human. And we all need to process and go through whatever struggle we're going through. But when you look at the people who have gone through such terrible, hard things on this side of heaven, and yet God has carried them through and they're going forward, it's such an encouragement.
Yeah. And I've become sort of a joy junkie of sorts. I will mine for joy. And one of the ways that God has shown me is I look and I say, okay, Lord, how do you get pleasure? And he tells us in Luke 12, it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, well, if it's good enough for God, it's good enough for me. So I'm going to mine for joy. And if that means I have to give my time, and it's a lifestyle of generosity. And that's one of the reasons for me, when every year I want to give and be a part of Women Doing Well, because I know that generosity is the way that the Lord brought joy to me. And I think, okay, Lord, you tell us every good and perfect gift is from you. So that means anything in my life, anything at all that I think is good or perfect, I can go ahead and give God thanks for. And he gave it. He didn't charge my account. He didn't render it. He gave it. And so I think, okay, what do I have that could be good or perfect for somebody else? And it could be time. It could be, volunteering somewhere. It can be, of course, always resources. And I would challenge you that God meets you there because he is the provider of everything and it's all his anyway. So yeah, I think for me as a joy junkie, generosity is the way. It's the way he does it. And I want to be, I want to be bringing him closer to people through that generosity. And that's always our prayer is like, Lord, let someone experience a little piece of you and your kingdom,
yes, right.
Through whatever it is. If we're giving, if we're donating clothes, I remember years ago, and it's a lifestyle. So it starts with what you have. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons, years ago, we had this underground school uniform trade. And we knew of families that were in need. And so we would get all the uniforms we could find, get them cleaned up, and just deliver them announonymously to these families.
So sweet.
And I remember thinking how important having 4 kids, having enough uniforms were. But that was one example back then. And I think now it's that same opportunity to just be on mission with God, right? Mm-hmm. And when we're generous, it's also an act of worship to him. But it's important that we understand things about ourselves, because I think, like you said, sometimes we think we don't have anything to give or we don't know what to give. Mm-hmm. And so at Women Doing Well, that's one of the reasons I love to be a facilitator, is because we get to just mine for joy. Women get to realize what their purpose is, why God created them, their passions, which those change with your seasons. And then we do a plan. So we teach you, and it's not anything we think you come up with your own, but we teach you how to execute your plan so you can experience God's joy. And watching women transform and kind of break out of this narrative that they don't have anything to give, or, they've passed that season of giving. I feel like if you have breath, then you have the ability to enter into generosity, and he will return joy packed down and heaping over. And it will be some now and some in eternity. But I know that as my testimony.
Well, talk to the listener about if they want to get involved in Women Doing Well locally or online, and talk about the upcoming Jackson Hole event this fall.
Yes. Okay. First of all, ladies, everybody go to womendoingwell.org and just put your information in so we can contact you. We do free facilitating pathways. It's 12 sessions. We can do them in a day. We can do them a week. We can do them on Zoom. We can do them in person, like retreats. And it's kind of the pay it forward model. You can sign up and take one for free. And then if you are blessed, you can donate And then that passes on, so the next person, kind of like when you get a coffee paid for at Chick-fil-A or Starbucks, pass it on. And we also partner with ministries and nonprofits so that they can take their people that they are involved with through. And then in November, we're having our annual conference in Jackson Hole, and everyone's invited. Just have to get on and fill out the forms. And we would love to have you. We'll have great times of speaking and community. And basically what we do is we work to figure out with you what God has purposed you to do and things that you feel fulfilled when you are a part of. And then we help you create that plan so you can go set the world on fire for God's love, but also for you to see how the world would be missing your contribution if you didn't step up and get to share.
Yes. And I have mentioned Women Doing Well numerous times in our 3 seasons. And the reason I mention it is because this is the Generous Girl podcast, obviously. And I don't know of another organization that helps a woman figure out her 2-word purpose statement, identify for this season what her passions are, how she wants to be involved with her time, talents, treasure, ties, testimony, and then her current plan for generosity. I don't know of any other organization that helps women. And like you said, for free, like you can join a group. There's the only thing you're going to look back and go is, wow, I made 6 new amazing friends for being a part of that. Like there's nothing you can lose in being a part of it. But normally in the past, the annual gathering hasn't been open to everybody who really wants to be a part of Women Doing Well. And this year it is. And Jackson Hole is where my parents retired. So I've been going there for, 25, 30 years, and such a beautiful, special place. And so this event will be November 2nd to the 4th. And if you're wanting to just dip your toe in, what does it look like living a generous life? The women who will be there are incredible, incredible women. It's an incredible tribe of people. And it will be one of the best, 2-day conferences you've ever attended. So a little shout out there for Women Doing Well.
Yes. And the thing we find is women find each other, and that community is.
Yes, exactly.
And so again, you cannot outgive God. You think you're giving or learning to give better, and he gives you, women to just journey with, and be together. And so it's incredible.
Mm-hmm. It definitely is. And it makes life so rich. But because you just know these people have been handpicked to be in your life as you've been handpicked to be in somebody else's life. And it's iron sharpening iron. And all of us, linking arms together, we're better together. No competition is often, women love to compare and men compete, but none of that really goes on. It's like we just want to help each woman be all she was made to be and live into her calling and live that generous life. And she'll never look back. When you talked about bringing joy, the other thing that reminded me of is when my kids were younger, our friends, they lost a daughter to glioblastoma, but she started creating joy jars and gave those to other kids, in the hospital. And it's turned into this whole ministry called NEGU, NEGU, Never Ever Give Up. And just the same thing, just spreading joy and bringing joy to the kids and the hospital, and just a beautiful ministry. I know. Yes. Well, I think you've alluded to, for sure, your journey with your children and the challenges, the joy and the sorrow but as we say with this podcast, it's like we like to have the person listening be encouraged by the guest, knowing that you're thriving now, but you were certainly in a season that was very, very challenging. Anything else you want to add to that part of how you overcame adversity and were able to take the next step?
I think it was one day at a time. God was so generous, and his love was so covering that one day led into the next day, which we turned around, we had a week. And I would say that generosity for us has just been the way that God has continued to pipe his love and grace into us, as we continue to walk. And we now have adults with mental health issues. And so we're learning to parent and to walk with these adult children. And even in that, God is, you can't outgive him.
Right.
And it's been a blessing and it's been a challenge. And there are days that, I'm mining for that joy because things are hard. And yet he meets me even in those hard places. And usually it will be an email from a woman, maybe that's in a group I'm facilitating, or maybe it's an invitation like this to share his goodness. And I always think, Lord, you have unlimited, you say you give to us, out of a portion out of your whole kingdom. And so thank you, and I think when we think about, John 3:16, for he so loved that he gave. When I need his love, right, I can mine for joy and I can mine for his presence when I, line up with him in mission and give. And it's not just giving, again, money, but sometimes it is. And just to see and to get testimony of what other people do, what he's done in the kingdom with things that we've given. So joy can be all kinds of ways. And he says, it's more blessed to give than receive. And I believe that. But I believe the blessing of giving is partnering with him and the intimacy with him, right? And walking with him in obedience.
Beautiful. Anything that, as you were talking, I was just thinking of the people that have been there for you and have shown up so strong. Any stories you have of like what somebody did to encourage you, or on the converse, how you would tell all of us when we know someone is going through a really hard time, these are some great things that you would recommend doing for people. Like my husband used to work in this overseas ministry, and they called it literally the ministry of the wet shoulder. And they would go to very, very challenging places where it costs people's lives to be believers. And that's what they would do. They would be there, allow these believers to cry on their shoulder. They weren't there with solutions. They weren't there to be a top-down approach of America knows how to do this at all. It was literally, we're going to be there and be with you. And it was the ministry of the wet shoulder. So anything you want to say about that?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. We lost our oldest son, Christopher, 18 months ago to an overdose, and that was laced with fentanyl. So we are in that statistic. So
sorry, Teri.
Thank you. It's been, God was so good to us to love and reassure us. And he did, one of the ways that he ministered to us was our small group that we've been together over 20 years now for his service. They came and moved in. These three couples their ministry of presence, like you're talking about, they did everything. They wrote thank you notes. They answered and received food. They did everything for us. They served, they cleaned up. They just literally were there for us. And I think when you give of yourself like that, it was the deepest form of generosity we could have possibly ever imagined. And that is what I would say to the listeners is give of yourself, give the ministry of your presence first. And if that is taking somebody to the doctor, if that's going to lunch, if that's just going and sitting, you don't have to give advice. You don't have to give a solution. Your ministry of presence usually is the strongest, I think, gift you can give someone. And it's also very hard because you're vulnerable. Maybe you feel like you don't know what to say, or you haven't experienced it, or maybe their grief is so deep, you don't know how to make it better. But just by being there, you bring the aroma of Christ with you.
It's like Jesus with skin on.
It is. It is. And we bring the kingdom a little bit closer. And that's why I always say, just sprinkle the world with generosity. And it can very well start with just your presence. And for us, that was a very real time that we experienced such deep love and such deep, real physical need. And they just came. And I couldn't believe they just came. And they loved us so deeply. And so that ministry of presence to me is the strongest thing we can give.
And just to encourage the listener, if God is prompting you to text someone or call someone or bring a meal, do it.
Yes.
Take the step. Yes. Oh, so sweet. And you remember those times with those people who were there. I can think in my own life also of individuals that showed up. And, even when my dad was passing away a year and a half ago, like friends of my parents in Jackson Hole, there were just certain ones that were so there texting us and coming over. And I didn't, as kids not living there, just not even knowing some of these generous people. And just so kind. So, thank you for sharing. You're such a beautiful person. And I love to see this season that you're in of, continuing to be a Bible teacher, but now stepping into the chairman of the board for Women Doing Well. And I really feel like with all the groundwork that's been laid in Women Doing Well and the many women's lives who've already been touched, it feels like it's at this kind of point of it's going to keep blowing the top off with its growth. And, more and more women across the country are going to know what it is, because it's something we don't want to be a secret because it's so great.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I always like to wrap up with 3 things, like current Bible or favorite Bible verse, any book you love or currently reading, and then a recent bargain.
Yes. Okay. So my life verse is Luke 1:45, which is, blessed is she that believes that what the Lord has said to her will be accomplished. Mm-hmm. And I believe that above all else, if he tells you to do it, he's going to do it. Yeah. And so join in with him as fast as you can. Mm-hmm. A book that I love and that I read often is Tim Keller's How to Walk with God During Hard Times. God just continues to minister and to love on me and to be present and remind me, of how much he loves me in that book. And then my bargain is Raktukin.com. If you do any kind of online shopping, you can go through Raktukin and you can purchase everything, and then you get a percentage back and you get a check. And the thing I love about it is then you can just give that money away.
Wow. How do you spell Raktukin?
It's Raktuken, Raktukin.com.
Perfect. I'm going to try that. I have my long list of all these great verses and books to read and bargains. Oh, well, I so appreciate it was probably Julie who connected the two of us, and I've been able to get to know you on a couple of these calls, and you're just such a blessing, such a bright light, and you do just inspire joy. I know you've done that on the podcast today, so I'm just grateful for your generosity of all of the things that you share so freely of yourself. And would you be willing to close out in prayer for the women listening to maybe who's lacking some joy right now, and just through your encouragement would be wonderful.
Yes.
Okay.
Father, thank you for this time. Lord, I pray that whatever the situation is right now with the listener, that Lord, that they would just feel you envelop them in love and hug. And Lord, I pray that your presence would be so real to them. And Lord, I thank you. I thank you for all the ways that you love us. And I thank you for all the things that you're doing in in our lives that we can see. And then all the things, Lord, that you are day by day uncovering. And Lord, I just pray in encouragement for the women to seek you and find you, Lord. And I ask blessings over Kim. And I pray that this podcast, Lord, that you will use it to reach us and to know that right when we needed you, Lord, that this is a way that you were able to reach out and love on us and encourage us. In the strong name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, God bless you, Teri, and I'll look forward to seeing you in person at some point.
Yes, thanks so much.
Okay. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.